Jay Campbell!
There's no secret, there's no shortcut. Everything that is alive is conscious. Be silent, be still, and know God. Until you feel worthy, it ain't gonna happen. Rigorous, ruthless, disciplined focus. You have to get to a place where you can work on yourself. Well, what's up, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you might be around the world. Of course, I am Jay Campbell, and you are watching the Jay Campbell, Hunter Williams, and Laura Knight-Jadczyk podcast. It's only taken me 5 episodes to pronounce her last name correctly. Laura and Hunter, how are you?
I'm fine. I'm good.
Beautiful things. So it is a beautiful Sunday. Actually, it's a beautiful Saturday. I can't even keep my day straight here in Tampa, Florida today on April 6th. And as we both, or all three of us know, it is impressive times or unprecedented times, depending on your viewpoint. This is, again, episode 5 of a very deep dive interview about Laura's life, works, writings, authorship, and a lot of other things. And the first 4 interviews have been, I mean, what would you say, Hunter? Profound, I think, is really the only word that comes to mind.
Earth-shaking, and hopefully for the people listening, if this is your first exposure to her work, destabilizing in a good way, because I think that's what is necessary for a lot of people right now as we try to navigate what's going on in the world. So definitely both of those.
Yeah, that's a really good way to say it. So I think we'll start the show today. I mean, there's been so many things. It's kind of hard to recap all the stuff. I mean, I'm gonna let my team do all of that when they go through all of these different episodes. And as you said, Laura, I think it's best to just let them run native, which we'll do. But we'll remove some parts that we know we need to remove, and we'll let it go. But I think the first question today, I think, is really relevant to what we all have been in the background talking about just in the last couple of weeks it's actually been 3 weeks since we last convened, due to travel and due to some medical stuff that all of us are dealing with. But the undergrounders, right? So you've sent us recently the articles that you wrote. It's unbelievable. Back in 2002 about, I think it was a Dark Night in Tibet, or Journey into a Dark Night in Tibet, or whatever that book that was written in the 30s from whomever that pen name or pseudonym was. And Hunter and I read all those articles. And of course, we've already read the C's, or the Cassiopaean Substack, which Jared, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, has been putting together articles. So all of those tied together, if I was to summarize what's actually happening, is it seems like, and obviously we have the books, right? We have the Wave series and some of your other books. And oh, by the way, we're about 145 into this book now, Political Powerology, and it's melting my brain. But if the overarching narrative of the undergrounders for the layperson who doesn't know what we're talking about, is that there is essentially a race of, I guess, human beings and others living underground, or living in inner earth, or under the earth, or however you want to phrase it, hollow earth. There's so many different phraseologies of it. Can you kind of just explain, like, what is going on in, say, the inner earth?
I would say that it's probably hyperdimensional. I don't necessarily think it's like there are parts of it that are 3-dimensional, like so density or whatever. But I would say that most of it is like some kind of other dimensional space, and that these beings are hyperdimensional or ultra terrestrial, as you might call it. So it's not exactly what people ordinarily think of. There's an American theologian or history of theology. Her name is Pasilka, and she wrote a book called American Cosmic. You might want to write that down. And she's, an academic, and she's done a lot of research into the whole UFO, alien, whatever phenomenon. And she was doing an interview, I believe, with Joe Rogan just recently.
Wow.
And you might want to check that out, because in this interview, she points out that very bravely that, when people are talking about UFOs or whatever, that obviously there is something that is not in our reality, not directly in our reality. It's in another reality. It's in another dimensional space. And it draws from our reality and from its own reality and somehow manifests things that seem to be totally physical and material in our reality, but it may not be entirely. And Joe Rogan's eyeballs crossed. So, but she's kind of onto that. And if you think about it, also there was this guy. What was the guy's name that recently came out and testified before Congress? Grush.
Oh, great.
David Grush.
Old Grush, he gets out there. Nobody questioned his credentials in these hearings. And he just, basically was saying, there are captured craft and there were biologics that were found. And then, senators are asking questions. Okay, next question. They ask him a question. He says, we'll talk about it in closed session.
Right.
Okay, next question. The media, basically crickets. And, and Joe Rogan show, which goes out to many millions of people. I think it's one of the most popular podcasts.
He has the largest audience on the planet.
Yeah. And so basically she's telling people that there are ultra terrestrials interacting with our environment, with our people, etc. And basically, crickets. And this basically tells you that there is not ever going to be, anything like full disclosure in the sense of what some of these people are hammering and haranguing for. So when you talk about undergrounders, you have to be careful that you don't get into like some kind of panic mode and think that there is like, a bunch of, a race of orcs or something that are going to
Cave trolls.
Yeah, that are going to come pouring out of the underground or whatever. This sort of there's interdimensional parameters here, so you can't just take everything as cut and dried third density 3-dimensional. I mean, for example, you're very fond of the dracominoids, and you're really taken by the 13-foot tall alligators that wear clothes with holes for their tails, right? But think about it as a hyperdimensional phenomenon,
right?
And when you're thinking about that, you also have to realize that sometimes if something presents itself, some part of this phenomenon presents itself, not everybody can see it.
That's a good point.
And the most important thing I think that I did when I first gave up my resistance to the very idea of the UFO phenomenon being, anything other than people imagining things or swamp gas or meteorites or whatever. What I did is what I usually do is, go to the source. I read cases. And that's really what you have to do. You have to read cases. Don't take somebody else's analysis. Don't ever take somebody else's analysis unless you've got a lot of cases under your belt, because, that's, one person can see a particular set of phenomena and interpret it a certain way as, well, it's benevolent. And then another person can interpret it another way. Well, it's not benevolent, or it's, they're trying to communicate something to us, or it's symbolic, or so on and so forth. Forget all that. Just read the cases and try to see how many things repeat over and over and over again. And sometimes it comes down to very, very essential things. But that's the best way to get a really good grip on the phenomenon. So yeah, undergrounders. Now, the Caesar said some pretty bizarre things about that. I mean, they've talked about wars being situations where they replenish the stock of people underground because they harvest them from battlefields. Because on battlefields, a lot of people can end up missing and nobody makes a big hue and cry about it, because and that's one good way to get a lot of reinforcements. If they go into a hyperdimensional space, even as third density beings, things can be very, very different, because, if we're third density beings and animals are second density beings, animals and we share the same space time, but their reality is vastly different from ours. But there is still a lot of crossover and a lot of interaction. So just imagine the same thing between humans and hyperdimensional beings, they're fourth density beings, that there's some crossover and there's interaction. But I would suggest that their reality is so far different from ours that you can't really relate it directly as second to third and then third to fourth. So they're there. Okay, now they're probably recipients of extremely advanced technology. I mean, in terms of, say, medicine or healing or longevity, or harvesting their eggs and sperm and using them as breeding stock, or programming them and sending them out into the world. Or, they could pick somebody up on a battlefield, restore them, send them back, but they're restored in a way that they're completely programmed, or they're vastly altered, so that they reinsert themselves back into their previous life as best they can, but as, say, an agent in a sense.
Right.
There was a guy back 20 some years ago in the UFO community in Tampa, and he declared that he had been killed in Vietnam and had been picked up by aliens and resuscitated and repaired, and that I think he said he had 2 hearts and he had black blood and so forth. So I, being the kind of person I am, I said, well, do you have blood tests? Can we have somebody, take a sample right here and now and submit
Also
it?
biopsy on the spot.
Yeah, so obviously I didn't win any popularity contest with that type of attitude, but yeah,
That's why you're on the show, Laura.
yeah. So it turned out later on that he admitted to being a fraud, but that may not necessarily be true. He may be.
Right, the idea. Right.
He may be programmed. He may not. None of the things that he said that were truly outrageous might have been true, and they may have been being said just to bring disrepute on the phenomenon and on that UFO alien abduction community, so forth. And in fact, a lot of what is out there in the UFO alien field and the New Age field and so forth exists, I think, to create noise so that the real signal will not be perceived. So you have to be really careful. So anyway, back to your undergrounders. Breeding purposes, reinserting them back into human society for various reasons. For all we know, all of the whole woke liberal crowd.
So that was my next question then. So political ponerology posits that psychopathy, totalitarianism, all these extreme evil, if we classify them in third density terms, evil, negative, pathological. They even have a word. What is it? What is the word? What is the word path? It starts with a P.
Pathocracy.
Pathocracy.
Yeah.
That this is. But could this be from? So my real question related to the undergrounders is this: are the people that at the highest level that we know of? Obviously, there are many psychopaths, but like the Hitlers and the Pol Pots and the Stalins, were they some sort of masterpiece or final, achievement of, like, again, I don't want to call it reptilian, but fourth density hybridization along with underground, just interweaving with the human genome for so long? Because we know they've been hybridizing bits and pieces of us forever.
Yeah. Well, you could say that practically every living being that exists on the planet is something of a hybridization experimental project from fourth density creators and designers and so forth.
Right.
We asked more than we've asked a number of questions, and I suppose I hope Harrison, and that's his name, Harrison, by the way, Harrison Keeley. He's doing the C Substack, and he's done a terrific job.
He's amazing. I would love to have. We would love to interview him if you could set that up at some point. That would be amazing.
Oh, you can.
Perfect.
Just put him and Hunter next to each other, and they look like twins.
That's awesome.
He's actually in North Carolina too, I think. So I need to link up with him as well.
So yeah, we asked some questions about psychopathy, and I remember we were talking about organic portals. And remember, organic portals is, basically, in a sense, we're all organic portals. It's just some of us have something more and something more in potential. And they said that they were defective. Psychopaths were defective organic portals. And, and I tracked things back, in historical research, and came to the conclusion that psychopaths probably were the result of mutations during cataclysmic periods of Earth's history. He's also talked about deep level punctuators, which we can assume is somebody that comes from the underground realms. And they're probably, psychopaths, so they could be, specifically engineered in that way. So I think there's no simple answer, but there's no simple answer to anything. I mean, think about it. I mean, it's just, everything is just there. Everything is so possible. Everything is so potential in this universe.
Yeah.
That when you have to just take specific cases and examine them and try to figure out what you're dealing with. I mean, statistically, you get, broad similarities and broad patterns and ideas, just like you can statistically have ideas about, say, different ethnic groups of people, that they are this way or that way or the other way or something or other, because, ethnicity and genetics do play a very strong role in personality and the way people are intellectually and emotionally and so forth. But there's still individual cases.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that trying to assign psychopathy to a single origin would be, not giving it its due. However, I do think it has been encouraged. Breeding more psychopaths is encouraged, I think, from a hyperdimensional point of view. I think they have made it more possible. They may even use some of them and send them out as, like a bull to serve as a bunch of cows and produce more psychopaths. They tend to do that on their own anyway. They're, irresponsible parents. They're sexual psychopaths and so forth. But I think that there's a whole heck of a lot of them running the show in the U.S. and other Western countries today. I'm not going to lay it completely on the U.S., but it's kind of like the capital of SDS right
like
now.
You said, capital for diversity. Well, like, how about in Almost Human? Your analysis of this guy Einhorn, which I'm surprised I actually wasn't familiar with up until I read the book. But that is one of the most. I mean, Hunter, remember when we were reading about him and what kind of a psychopath would literally kill a woman and put her body in a trunk in his closet and then lie about it pathologically for 3 years and lie about it so convincingly that he actually believed that she wasn't actually there. And then when they found her, he told people, like, do you think that I'm that big of a psycho that I would put a body in a trunk in my closet? I mean, this is some next level, like you said, next level punctuator stuff.
Yeah. So I mentioned, I'm sure that I received emails from him.
Wow.
Year. And so the first one was 24 June 1999. He says, "Hi, Laura. I would be happy to dialogue with you after going through your comments more carefully, as I think we are essentially in agreement. I lived through years of the most fantastic phenomena without ever buying the mythology attached to them. The phenomena were very real and of almost daily occurrence. The myth attached to them was pure projection. But the unknown frightens people, and living in vanilla reality forces people to project. So when the paranormal becomes a daily reality, the desire to have an explanation grows exponentially. It began almost 30 years ago in a very different social climate, and the intel groups were initially freaked. If that different context is not understood, the rest becomes very confusing. More when I have time.
Wow.
I
How many more
mean,
did
that's the introductory letter.
how many more did he send you?
3, because
Holy.
at that point I cut it off. Right.
Was he wait a minute, was he in prison at this point when he's corresponding?
No, at that point he was on the run in France,
Oh my God.
I think. Then he sent me an addenda and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And then somebody sent me, oh, yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah. So, I mean, it kind of gives you the creeps because it was only after this. And I wondered what he was doing on this physics discussion group that, or the group my husband belonged to. And I was, fascinated by reading some of these posts. And I thought, well, who is this guy? Because I had written comments to the group myself, and that's why he wrote to me, was because he read my comments, and I guess he decided I was a great target, right?
Wow.
Somebody who's into the paranormal, and he could use his mumbo jumbo. And then I started looking him up, and then I just freaked.
Dude, that's incredible. But he actually he wasn't using a fake name. He was obviously using his real name when he was messaging you.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ, dude, that's insane. I mean, honestly, I'm just like, I got the heebie-jeebies just thinking about that, Hunter.
Well, one thing that Laura talks about a lot in that book that she could probably enlighten people to is how psychopaths, especially him, they use these language constructs where they try to sound smart, but they insert the wrong words on things and come off of them. And you have a lot of examples. I can't think of any just off the top of my head, but they'll say the wrong words about things.
Tropisms. Yeah. They're really, they use those so much. I mean, if you're sharp and if you know what's, when you're reading and you can catch those, that there's something going on.
Right.
So, yeah, but there are some studies.
I want to just read this sentence to you from the book. The absolute trust that my mother's strong relationship imposed on my psyche. Do I wish to master a woman sufficiently so that she will take care of me as my mother did?
Yeah.
What would even think like that?
Well, at that time too, he was probably also playing off this like whole Freudian thing and like the whole like psychology and a lot of the new age stuff that I didn't realize how intertwined he was with the new age.
Right.
But they do this thing where they use these like call outs and they'll say stuff like that. And then it almost like puts, in his case, women in a trance.
It's a
Like,
spell.
oh, he's such a guru. He's such a this. And that's going on today with social media people where they'll say these weird
It
things
is.
like that. Where if you actually deconstruct it, you'd be like, that's a really weird language construct to tell people. But for whatever reason, and this may relate to HARP or other things that like triggers people, and they're like, they just become a like blind follower of some of these guru types. And what's weird is like, yeah, of course that guy existed at one time in history where he had this following in the new age or whatever, but there's like many manifestations of that in our current world that's going on today of like all of these people that will like say these things and it triggers people into a trance in some weird way. And then it's like, for us, we look at it and they're like, how could you think that that person's saying something of value? But to them, it's like this, like God's honest truth that they're hearing.
Well, let me expand on that. So expanding on that for Hunter, for Laura would be, are they doing it on both sides? So think about how they have the atheists, science, trust the science. And then you have the Jesus freaks. So what if they're doing it on both sides? And I mean, you proved again in this book in Almost Human about the CIA mind control programming of the Pentecostals and the deep Christian, whatever you call it, fundamentalist Christians.
Yeah, well, I realize this even back in the day when I was going to church pretty regularly, because, when I was in college, I had trained in hypnotherapy. And I remember sitting there in the church and realizing that the evangelist, who was there for a week or whatever, was using very standard hypnotherapy techniques. They start off with the yes set, and then they go into other things, and then they get the people in trained. But me, I'm sitting there observing what he's doing and thinking to myself,
Oh my God.
how many people are, being taken in by this? That's what, and what they end up doing in say Pentecostal church, which in this case it was, they end up getting people, what would they call it, into a state of limbic resonance.
Yeah, the glossolalia.
And they get into the whole glossolalia and all of that sort of thing. But the thing about that is, and this is very interesting, is it sometimes produces phenomena that is absolutely extraordinary, which
Supernatural.
which just tells you that there is a lot of what the mind can do going on there.
Right.
And if those kind of people can get people into limbic resonance to effect miracle cures, which does happen.
Yeah.
What can they do if they have very nefarious intentions? At least in a Pentecostal church, for all intents and purposes, most of the time there's a benevolent agenda. I mean, if they want to scare them to give them some money, so what? They're putting in their time and their talents, whatever. I mean, people pay money to go to a football game, to go to a rock concert, all that kind of stuff. You go to church and you get a different kind of an experience, but you get an experience.
Right.
Pentecostal churches, at least.
Yeah.
And you get this experience, and so why shouldn't you put $5 in the plate when they pass it, or 20 or whatever? I was always very generous. Because I appreciated what was happening. I understood it as an exchange.
Yeah.
So, for a long time, I was pretty hostile about Christianity. I mean, when I first came out and realized that it wasn't true.
The God's bell was broken.
Yeah. The way it was presented wasn't true. My feelings were hurt. So,
yeah, of course.
So, I was a little hostile, but as time has gone by and I've, learned more, worked with a lot more people. I mean, 25 years we've been working with people and dealing with people and observing and watching what's going on, transpiring in the global and the social stage. And I've come to the conclusion that of all the different things that people could be doing, the least harmful is Christianity. I mean, the least harmful. I mean, the New Age thing is really just fundamentalism 2.0.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's but we ran quite away from our undergrounders, but
I think it's all related. Well, I mean, I want to ask you then about, just to keep going because it's so fascinating. You sent me an article this morning that we have proof that they're trying to detune or turn off the spiritual center in the brain.
Yeah, that's what, that's kind of what I got out of it, because they can use electromagnetic waves or some kind of waves to turn off those parts of the brain that cause people to adhere to their faith or to believe in things. And it's pretty sad. But at the same time, I mean, it's so discouraging to see what they're doing and what they're thinking about. And they even say they can separate conservatives from their, apparently wrong views. Well, sorry, but I'm a conservative. And if you read Jonathan Haidt's book, and that's Haidt, or Haidt or Haidt, I prefer Haidt. I think Haidt's kind of a weird way to pronounce it. So, but he wrote for The Righteous Mind. And he talks about the differences between the perspectives of, say, liberals and conservatives. And apparently, conservatives have a far richer and more nuanced and more intelligent worldview
That's
than
100% accurate.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
that's 100% accurate. I mean, I don't even actually know how anyone, because as you know, all three of us are old enough, even though Hunter's just a baby, 30. We've all been through school and we've all been conditioned to be liberal and to be accepting and, to have a pure heart and a soft heart or whatever you want to call it, and compassionate. Yeah, right. But then as you get older and wiser, at least some of us do, as my Monica's father says now, Jay, common sense just ain't common anymore.
Yeah.
But literally, as we get older and wiser and more experiential and experienced, and hopefully we've traveled and we've met different cultures and different peoples and different things, we realize that is basically ideological claptrap for the most part. Like, obviously, you have to be compassionate as a human being. And that's the key of ascending, hopefully, into fourth density as a service to others candidate. But at the end of the day, you can't just be ignorant of what reality is. And I would say that, like, supremely leftist ideological, whatever they are, satanic at this point, Luciferian, whatever we want to call them, they're just living in delusion, completely living in delusion, because they don't want to take personal responsibility for what's true and what isn't.
Oh, they don't believe that there is any truth. I
Right.
mean, everything is totally relative. I mean, they took relativity to a really bizarre place and level because, and they're always talking about, my truth, your truth, my reality. And I mean, excuse me, there is truth. There is forensic truth. There is mathematical truth.
Yes.
And when you say my truth and your truth, one person's truth could be in alignment with how the universe sees itself, and the other person's truth could be completely orthogonal. And I don't think people want to get into that kind of a disagreement with the universe because you're not going to survive it.
Do you remember Wayne Dyer, the master of the New Age?
Yeah.
And he would always tell you that there was more than one truth. Your truth is not my truth. I remember reading that because when I first got together with Monica, and I was doing a lot of introspective work, a lot of, self-help stuff. And I would read that and I was like, this is absolute nonsense. Like, I literally took his book and threw it across the room. I'm like, this is nothing of the sort. So it's like, you really do have to do enough work to take what's worthy and take and what isn't. And as you said in your books, and you've made a very, very accurate portrayal, the majority of the New Age is literally being mind controlled themselves.
Yeah. Well, I think what they tried to piggyback that on was the fact that every person has their own experience and has their own feelings about things. For example,
Right.
You may say something to me that causes me to feel offended because of some experience I had in the past that has nothing to do with you, and then, may trigger me to react in a certain way. And then, when we finally sit down and discuss it, we find out that you didn't mean it the way I took it, and we have to come to some, meeting place. So I think what they did was they piggybacked on this idea that everybody has their own experiences
Right.
and their own perception of things, which may or may not be accurate. Because if you offended me because I'm basing my reaction on something that happened to me way in the past that has nothing to do with you, it's not truth. It's my perception. It's not my truth. And so they took this and just piggyback, and everybody, of course, can experientially feel that, I had all of my own experiences and I see the world a certain way and da 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 da. And yeah, that's right, I have my truth. But that's not what it is. It's not my truth. And I'll give you an exact example. There was a girl I knew back in Florida, and she was aspiring to be a writer. And she was She wrote something and she gave it to me to read or edit. And it was full of malapropisms and, words being used inappropriately. And when, like I showed her this word and I said, well, what do you mean by this? Because that's not the right word. And she said, well, it's not the right word, right? And I said, yeah. And she said, well, then other people will know too, but that's the word I like.
Oh my God.
And I said, what are you writing this for? Are you writing this for other people to read it? Well, yeah. Are you writing for other people to understand it and to come to some, meeting place with you and between your mind and their mind? I said, well, this is not the way to do it. You need to find the commonly agreed upon definition of words, use the appropriate word in the appropriate place so that, the majority of people will be able to read it and understand it. And then, do that. Don't make it all about you, what you like, but that was her truth.
Laura, I wanted to ask you in regards to kind of like this leftism, find your own or be your own truth, whatever. Sometimes I wonder, so obviously if we fast forward that agenda, it would lead to wholesale destruction, I would think. Like if everything got accomplished that is going on right now, it would lead to wholesale destruction. So is that what is going to happen? Or are we in this like hero's journey story arc where this is overcoming like a struggle, and then we have, I don't know if it's a revolution or somewhere where we have to defeat this and come over it? Or is it something that is just going to lead to the destruction of this density, and then that plays out, and then that, I think if you look at a timetable, you'd say like, well, if this continues to go on at this pace, within 10 to 15 years, like the earth as we know it would be destroyed, institutions, civilization, and all things would be destroyed? Or is this something that you think will overcome and use to come back better? I don't know.
I don't think it can be fixed. That's the first thing. The second thing is it can't continue forever because so many people are feeling compressed, repressed, suppressed, depressed. So there's going to be, a reaction. I mean, it's like Putin said, if we push a spring at a certain point, it's going to spring back. So hold on, I gotta turn this stupid thing off. I don't know how it got turned on. I made it worse. There's a little heater under my desk and it fell over and it turned itself on. When you're pumping out hot air, and I'm thinking,
oh God, it was them, Laura. It was them. They're trying to disturb the broadcast.
But yeah, the teams have said a few times, not too many, but a few, that we're heading toward a big cleansing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think when they use the word cleansing, it's not what we would consider to be a friendly term.
No.
And they made one remark at one point. It says, well, nothing lasts forever, and thank God for that.
Yeah, right.
What's going on right now cannot last forever, and thank that. But there's not too many ways that it can rebalance itself, because we're talking about individuals, and ponerology will get into that, because when pathocrats are in power, for them, staying in power is a matter of existential necessity, because they know that if they are no longer in power, once they are out of power, that they are going to feel the repercussions of, the anger of humanity or other people against them for what they have done. So they will go to unbelievable extremes to stay in power. And we've seen it in history. I mean, look at what Hitler did at the end. Destroyed Germany himself, essentially, because, he declared that the Germans didn't deserve to live because they didn't win when he wanted them to. And you're seeing this fear. It's not the kind of fear that we would understand. It's because when we're afraid of, something rational, and they're afraid of not being in power, and they're determined to do. I mean, this World Health Organization, this World Economic Forum, and all the people that they've put into power in various places. These people are pretty frantic
Yeah.
to keep their hand on the reins of power. And when you see the blatant, I mean, there is no freedom in the U.S. anymore.
No.
I would say that the U.S. at the very least is going to be destroyed. And I hate to say it, but I mean, because
Seems so.
it doesn't see. I don't see how it can go any other way. I mean, it's either going to be destroyed by this mass immigration or migration of illegal aliens into the U.S., and there'll be a civil war, or somehow people are gonna, get into it'll either be a civil war or a revolution. And they are different things, but the thing is, I don't see it. I don't see it surviving. And the other thing is that the amount of hatred that is directed against America from a lot of other places all over the world, and I would say that the common people in countries that are supposedly friendly with the U.S. or allies with the U.S., the common people don't see it necessarily the way their leaders do. I don't think the common French people necessarily feel all that friendly toward Americans, and I don't think the Germans or the Italians or, I think that they see what Americans are like when they come to visit, and they see a lot more than what we give them credit for. And that's just the countries that the U.S. hasn't destroyed or attacked. Think about the Iraqis, think about people in the Middle East, people in the what would you call it, the Vietnam, Thailand, whatever, those areas where the U.S. has been dropping bombs forever. And there's just a lot of people around the world that really hate the United States, although they may like Americans or may not. It depends. They may like Americans individually, but they can see what the U.S. is doing. It is the big bully. And so the idea that there may be a nuclear war, it's a real possibility. And if it does, the U.S. is going to get nuked righteously.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to be, yeah, it's not a pleasant picture. And I would say that a lot of those kinds of things, now, whether that's going to happen or whether we're going to get bombarded by, overhead explosions of comet fragments that are going to ablate the landscape, which has happened multiple times in history, periodically and even regularly. It's 6 of one, half a trillion of the other. What the hell was that?
Sounded like a gunshot.
Did you hear that?
Yeah, it sounded like a gunshot.
Yeah.
Ready?
Yes.
What was it?
Explosion.
It was an explosion.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Holy shit, that's crazy.
All right. Close the blinds and go outside and see if you can see something. Maybe it was a bird hitting the window. Maybe there's a dead bird laying on the
It
sidewalk.
literally sounded like a sawed-off shotgun blast.
Yeah, I just went on the speaker. That's what it sounded like.
I mean, the window's just like that. Go see
Did it break? Did the window break?
No. No, they're super heavy duty windows.
That's crazy. Maybe that was a message from him as you were saying.
Hopefully there's no black boomerangs over the house or anything
why
right now.
were we talking about whether we're going to get hit by a comet or a nuclear war?
You manifested that. Well, I want to say something to what you were saying, though. So I agree 100%. I've traveled the world extensively in the last 10 years, and most foreign countries like Americans individually based on who you are vibrationally. But yes, the idea of America as like the great usurper, this, ideological country that bombs everyone into the Stone Age that doesn't agree with their policies is 100% true. And I will also say that previous to my travels, when I was more, red, white, blue, America, fuck yeah. I was brainwashed into thinking that, all these places like the Frenchies, I have so many good friends and French friends now, were just bad people or just, all the stereotypical bullshit that Americans have been brainwashed into thinking. And I've found now through my travels that it's the opposite. It's literally the opposite.
Yeah, and the thing is that what to do, that has to be up to every individual. But I would say that if anybody in the United States, but it's hard because, I know how people feel, they want to try to stay and fix it and defend it.
Yeah.
Yeah, come on. Genealogy is my hobby. I have so many ancestors who fought in the American Revolution that, I could join DAR 50 times or on 50 different lines. Yeah, I don't know. It's a really hard call to make. Really hard call.
Yeah.
But getting out of the U.S. might be a good idea for the person that it's the right idea for.
I think it's the right idea for everyone, but not everybody unfortunately can afford it. I left the US for 10 months and now I'm back. But I'm close for me right now, I'm close enough to Mexico that it still justifies. But obviously I'm in total agreement with you. It's most people don't know any better. They've lived in one place their whole life.
Mexico, some places in Central America, South America, some places. There are different places where people can go.
Hunter, do you agree that the U.S. is being programmed to be destroyed?
I think so. One thing I've noticed, Laura, is, and I have only traveled to Mexico recently since the introduction of 5G and different like overwhelming frequency technology that's been introduced in the last couple of years, really since 2020, I guess that you would say it seems to be ratcheted up. It seems like there's a harmonic / frequency control grid over the United States. And when we go to Mexico, I don't notice that. And I don't know if that's 5G. I don't know if it's HARP. I don't know if it's something there. But when I leave the United States and then I come back, I notice we always joke, but we always say Jay, Monica, my girlfriend and I, when we came back, we said, "Oh, we feel like we're back in the Matrix." And it really felt like we came back into this frequency modulated control grid. And the people, even though people are just different in different countries, it seemed more of like a zombie state here in the US, to where people in Mexico, obviously there's zombies everywhere, but they didn't have that same sensation, if that makes sense. Like when you interact with a person face to face.
There's no spraying. There's no spraying in the skies, Laura, either. So is Hunter's accurate? And then Hunter, also to add to your point, the food in Mexico is literally 10 times better. It's cleaner.
It's funny because the other day I saw a comparison. Did you find anything? No dead birds.
Okay.
So
they were just making themselves known that they're listening to.
There was a comparison between 2 boxes of cereal, the one that's made in the EU and the one that's made in the US. And I don't know if y'all have seen this, but they're, the one that's made in the EU has like 5 ingredients, and the one made in the US has like 50 ingredients, most of them chemicals. And because, there are a couple of positive things about the EU, but not enough to keep it going. For some of the early rules they made about, food and produce and, purity of it and having clearly marked boxes or packages and so forth. So, here, if you buy a box of cereal, even if it's the same name or brand that you get in the US, it's not going to be the same thing. It's not going to be full of poison. Here you get plenty of fresh produce that is not sprayed with any of the chemicals that are sprayed on the produce in the US because it's against the law. And they don't use, like glyphosate. It's against the law. and a lot of other things that are just simply against the law. They don't use them. And you can get raw milk, and you can get cheeses made from raw milk and so forth, because, come on, France is the land of 1,000 cheeses. So there are places in the world where you can live a better life than you live in the US. I mean, even food-wise, there are trade-offs. I mean,
All the
Texas.
food is contaminated, Laura, in the United States. All of it. Hunter and I talk about this all the time. There's nothing, you cannot go to a 5-star, internationally famous restaurant and not be laden. Your food is laden in chemicals. It's impossible to eat in the United States without getting chemicals on your food. Almost everyone who lives healthy has to either buy from an organic farm that's like sustainable, close to them. And even that, right? I mean, how are they stopping from what's coming out of the sky? But you cannot buy any organic or grass-fed or wild-caught meats at Costco's or any place. They're all contaminated at this point. Everything.
Yeah, and that's what we love about where we are, because we live in the countryside and we're surrounded by farms and fresh produce. And every Thursday in our town is market day, where all the local farmers bring their produce in to sell to all the local people.
That's awesome.
And there's plenty of wild boar and deer around. I mean, you can buy venison and wild boar in the supermarkets.
That's awesome.
I don't think you can get that really in the U.S.
It's actually illegal here to sell venison if it's not farm raised. So it can't be wild venison. It's illegal, at least in the United States, to do that. I wanted to ask Laura, because obviously Jay and I talk about health stuff a lot. What do you think the hyperdimensional nature of the engineering of food is doing it to us? Because I think you have glyphosate, which causes microtears in the gut lining to give people leaky gut, which then affects their neurotransmitter signaling because of what's going on in their brain. So a lot of people are like, oh, glyphosate's bad just because it's bad because it causes health issues. But do you think there's something my suspicion is that there may be something going on with engineering people by affecting their neurotransmitter signaling through the disruption of their hormones and their gut microbiota and all these things. Do you think, obviously everything's like kind of layered, do you think there's a hyperdimensional control mechanism behind food engineering to the human genome that's going on right now to humanity?
Yeah, I do. And I'll tell you why, because I would say that a lot of these people who are responsible are coming up with these health rules and regulations and vaccine schedules, and people like Kellogg who set up the whole thing to destroy,
Food group.
people's health,
Food
and the food pyramid and the whole 9 yards. It's got to be hyperdimensionally controlled in order to make human beings more controllable. And
Right.
in one of our several sessions we had with the Seas, we talked somewhat about this, and we talked about the fact that DNA is an antenna.
Right.
Every cell in your body has DNA, and it's an antenna.
Right.
Depending on what DNA is active, determines what antenna is activated or being utilized. And for example, the use of vegetable oils. Vegetable oils are very, very bad.
Horrible. Seed oils are contaminated. All of them.
And one of the reasons is that the cellular membrane that surrounds every single cell in your body is made out of oils. And animal oils produce membranes that are smooth and homogeneous. Vegetable oils produce little pieces of almost like plastic that get agglomerated together to make these cell walls, and they're spiky. And they're not the least bit conducive to interacting with the cellular environment, including brain chemicals and whatever is going on. So you can destroy your entire body by consuming a lot of vegetable oils. We have olive oil, like for salads.
Yeah.
And sometimes we make mayonnaise with grapeseed oil because it makes a nice mayonnaise. But yeah, we make our own mayonnaise.
Smart.
But for the most part, we do nothing but animal fats. Beef fat, duck fat's very big in France. Because there's a big duck industry. I wish there was something like that in the U.S. God, I would never go back to the U.S. because I couldn't get any good food.
I know. Well, it's funny too because it affects the permeability of that cell membrane to allow nutrients in and out. And like you were saying, it makes it like very rigid and rough. Whereas if you have a cell membrane that's built on animal fats, it allows for the transport of all those nutrients into the cell. So
and that right away, is going to affect a lot of things. But what is even more important is the effect on the DNA and the damage that's being done to DNA by some of these chemicals.
That's right.
And I would say that a person's ability to receive cosmic transmissions, if you want to call them that, depends on the state of their DNA.
100%.
That's your antenna. It's a receiver, a sender and a receiver. So whatever DNA is activated in you, and it can vary from moment to moment depending on what's going on in your body. Depends to a great extent on your food, probably on any kind of waves you're being subjected to, like 5G or
Right.
microwave radiation, even HARP radiation and so forth. So I think that there is an engineering going on.
Well, I can take it one step deeper. Let's go deeper. So fat acceptance. Now the glorifying of obesity. Now, I know this for a fact that the more visceral body fat, well, first off, let's unpack this deeper. So visceral body fat is more inflammatory than kerosene.
Mm-hmm.
So you start thinking about how they're promoting fat acceptance, obesity, insulin resistance.
I have been for most of my life, but I don't overeat. I never do.
I don't think you're fat. I mean, I'm talking about like what my mom was. My mom was 400 pounds. She was like morbidly obese.
I think that fat people, they have more than just an eating problem.
Sure.
A lot of them. Because to me, fat is inflammation. I mean,
right, exactly. That's where I was going with. So
it's a condition. It's a disease even.
It is, yeah.
And the more fat you get rid of, when I lose weight, I feel so much better because I get rid of inflammation. But It's very difficult for me because I have a specific mutation that makes it almost impossible. Which details of which are unnecessary. But I think that the glorification of fat is extremely. It's terrible because look at what they've done. They have made it so that 60 to 70% of American people are overweight.
70. So you ready for this? This is a new statistic. This is insane. 72% of men and women over the age of 40 in the United States are obese, not overweight, obese.
And how did they get that way? They didn't get that way, in any kind of natural way. I mean, they got that way because their food is poisoned.
Yes, air, water.
The air, the water, the hormones that they put in. I would say the hormones they put in meat is probably one of the worst.
Milk, just milk.
And hormones in milk and meat. So now they've got this 70 some percent population that's overweight, obese, and they're going to glorify it so that these people,
accept it. Yeah.
So people, think, well, the people who are glorifying it, those are the people I'm going to follow. And they're all libtards and they're all, so-called. So I'm going to be a libtard and woke too, I mean, I am a fat person, but I can still tell you that I am very glad that my girls are not, and I wasn't when I was young.
Right.
So I don't think.
But Laura, you still. But here's the difference. And again, I'm not defending you. I'm just saying the difference between you and Sam and Sally Smith in Topeka, Kansas, who are both obese and not even aware of it, is that it's like you just said, they don't even know what's being done to them. They're just living their life. They could be living on a farm. And, it's like Hunter, like Dr. Anthony J said, and Laura, you've been saying it too, with microplastics in the cellular walls, there's no possibility they could even lose their fat.
No.
Like they could exercise all day long and starve themselves, and their body will still not excrete these chemicals that have permeated the cell walls. It literally prevents digestion. It prevents excretion. I mean, it's incredible what these people are dealing with.
Well, I can only say for myself is that, I get blood tests regularly. I just had a doctor poking around in my innards, looking at everything. She says, God, it all looks so good.
There you go.
So even in spite of carrying the extra weight, I am extremely, extremely healthy. But I often wonder, and I asked the C's about it, and they told me that in my particular case, I needed to carry it because I needed it to carry the energy that I transduce.
Right.
And there are instances of rare individuals. This is not something that should be common in a society, who do carry extra weight for that reason, because they carry extra energy.
Mm-hmm.
For example, I think I even mentioned it before, people, great mediums like Cassiopaean Palladino could lose 15 pounds in a session, and that's not a small amount. And she was a large woman. She was, she was not like grotesque. It wasn't like 400 pounds or anything like that, but she was a large woman, probably, 230 pounds or something like that, probably tall. So there are even, if you look at the archaeological record and you see these models of these, like the Venus of Willendorf, these actually obscenely obese female figures that they think were like cult figures. And maybe they were like the woman who was the seer for the group, and she was carrying that weight because she needed to for her job, her job as the seer, as the psychic point of contact for that group. But for the most part, the people then simply were not obese. I mean, their diet didn't permit it. Their activity didn't permit it.
But obesity, though, I don't mean to cut you off or interrupt you, but obesity is a modern deal, right? Like this is,
it depends.
I mean, but isn't it due to more affluence and just being people having access to, on-demand instant gratification food and stuff?
Peter Paul Rubens. I mean, he painted these, really, really plush women. I'm a Rubens type, so I really like him. But but it's not something for young women. Young women who are in a reproductive age should not be obese.
Right. And that's and by the way, that's commonality now. I mean, again, you can go to any mall, any store that offers clothing, and everything is now designed around covering up center adiposity. It's incredible. It's absolutely insane. There's a lot of people out there, Hunter, you've seen them, that they analyze videography or video from the 70s and 80s of like large scale places like beaches all across the world. And they look at the anthropomorphy of the people versus today, and it's insane. There was very few people, regardless of age, that were considered obese. I mean, this is all modern industrial technological expansion and clearly a hyperdimensional, overt attack to the human genome. There's no question. They're making people more passive. They're making people more inflamed. Obviously, they're taking the testosterone out of men.
There may be another factor that's playing into this, but I wonder, because, we're due for an ice age. And, I even wonder if there's like some kind of signal that the DNA is picking up
To start holding on to weight.
to start holding on to weight for, you know, a long period of starvation. And I have to say that I always, you know, when my children were little, I always wanted them to be a little on the plump side in case they got sick, because a baby can lose a lot of weight very fast when they're sick.
Yeah.
I didn't want them to be, you know, like super skinny. But think about what we went through in the 70s. Well, you didn't go through it because you're too young. But
Hunter did.
Twiggy, think of Twiggy and how they started promoting this
Twiggy.
childlike physical appearance, and that was a complete mind job what they were doing.
Yeah.
And then how many models started,
And that's still being promoted today.
you know, and now
The cocaine diet, as they call it.
and so then they went the other way where, you know, people started objecting to it because some of these models were dying of
Malnutrition.
food disorders, eating disorders. And so then they started going the other way. And now what they're doing with this promotion of fatness, I have no freaking idea. It's
Scary stuff.
It's freaking obscene.
Well, like the picture, I mean, you know, Hunter and I are in a Telegram group with a bunch of guys, and we're all kind of like ex-jocks. And we talk about what they're doing right now with women's basketball. So it goes from how do I say it? It goes from like obesity, you know, putting that, you know, and I don't know who the woman is, but that, you know, they had that Nike model. She's a really fat black chick, and she's got belly rolls like hanging over, you know, her body, and she's just obscenely overweight. No, I mean, we're being honest here, and they have her in like a yoga, you know, spandex, and they promoted it everywhere. Hunter, you know which one I'm talking about. It was on every Nike commercial. It was all over the world. It was on Madison Square Garden billboards. It was everywhere. And it was like, just do it. You know, like, it's okay. You can be like this too. And you know, from a larger socioeconomic context and health context, as you know, it's not okay, because that is not health. It's the furthest thing from it. And it's proven that people like that don't live as long. It's just the way it is.
So here's my question, Laura. I've been like really low body fat before, and I honestly, like, when I'm like really, really low body fat and I don't feel, I guess, like spiritually attuned would be the word, because you're almost like in a starvation state. So you're just kind of like in like survival mode, you know? But I think there's the other side too, where you can have too much body fat and too much inflammation. I wonder, is all of this just a signal for people to not be the healthiest version? Because we can all agree that, like, whatever it is, if it's like the cocaine model versus like the chick from Nike that was like 400 pounds and a yoga studio, is it just to disconnect people from their true essence of like what a human should be, so that they're spiritually tapped in, so that they feel good about themselves, so that they can actually receive those cosmic downloads?
I think what they've done, at least from the human side, is they've taken all these different marginalized groups, you know, gay people and fat people and so on.
Trans, yeah.
Diversity, equity, and inclusion. Well, you know, diversity, equity, and inclusion really should be spelled DIE, because they're all going to die. Because what they're doing for themselves, to their bodies, is, I mean, whether they're becoming morbidly obese, or whether they're whacking off their peepees or their breasts, or taking, you know, sex hormones from the opposite sex for which they were born, they're destroying their bodies. Meanwhile, 72% of the population of the United States is probably obese, if not morbidly obese.
Incredible.
From all the chemicals that are in the food, from the hormones. I mean, 25 years ago, I read where children down in the Caribbean islands, where girls were getting their periods at the age of 6 or 7 because of the hormones in the chicken that they were eating. And so what they've done is absolutely freaking criminal, but it's not any more criminal than what they did with COVID, which was a complete scam. And poisoning, and of course, this guy that there's this doctor who's talking about the fact that the spike protein is designed to aid and abet mind control, or changing people's personalities, changing things in their brains. And we know that's possible because if you look at toxoplasmosis, toxoplasmosis can turn a mouse into a something that seeks out the cat to get eaten. And there are all kinds of parasites that people can get that affect the brain and affect the way they think and affect their personality. So I think it's all part of a human decimation program directed from hyperdimensional beings, fourth density, STS, because they want to reduce the human population to something like 19 million or something like that, and they are going to supposedly rule the human population through their appointed agents like Bill Gates and Anthony Fauci and all these other crazy, what's that Canadian guy, Trudeau. Yeah, and they're gonna, and I don't think those people even realize that they're going to be among the first that are going to be gotten rid of.
I know, right? Is it? By the way, do you think that all the rumors of Trudeau being Fidel Castro's illegitimate son? Do you think it's true?
Probably not. I mean, it's possible. I'm not going to exclude it as a possibility, but he looks like his father. Doesn't look like Fidel. So.
Do you think so? That's actually a good point, Jay. I just thought about. Do you think we've seen this with like Michelle Obama, that she was never really pregnant? There's a lot of these other like famous politicians and celebrities that they don't really have
the man.
Well, there's no question that's true. By the way, I have insiders. That's not for this show. We talk off air. I know that for a fact.
Yeah.
So why? So
I want to.
You think they would? Wouldn't they find psychopaths that could actually have real children? Or is that like the big joke that it's like, hey, we're going to put these people in power and they're also not going to be who they say they are. And then we're going to get like babies from other people and call them their kids or everything. It just seems like one big circus.
Now, you'll notice in ponerology, you'll talk about the fact that they don't want, the full blown psychopaths to be in the public eye because they can't control them.
Mm-hmm.
You see, and they have learned that they make things really bad with the public.
Right.
So they get people who have other kinds of pathological deviancies and put them in the positions where they're publicly visible. And the real hardcore psychopaths are the ones that are behind the scenes doing this, the super, super dirty stuff. So I would say all the people who are surrounding people like Joe Biden are probably the real psychopaths. People like Karl Rove and Pompeo and.
Well, that's actually an interesting question for you, and it goes into the Undergrounders articles that you sent us again from the Tibet stories of how that guy, whatever his name was, is talking about how there's quote unquote hyperdimensionals. Well, I like to think of all these shows that they've showed us on in Hollywood in the last 30 years about how there's immortals, right? There was Highlander. They're always kind of giving us, insider tips that there are beings walking amongst us that truly do live forever. The alchemists, however you want to call them, but
at least 800 years,
right? And perhaps longer. Again from the Hollywood shows. But do you think there are dark magicians, dark alchemical masters that are, because obviously we know about the psychic projectors that the seas have told us that are in the undergrounders or the inner earth or wherever they are, the hyperdimensional beings, and some of them are service to others and some of them are service to self. But do you think that we have this group of good guys and bad guys that are, again, immortals walking amongst us?
Well, the bad guy type immortals, in order to get to be immortal on the bad guy pathway, you have to become very contractile.
Right.
And a very contractile individual doesn't generally interact much with anything or anybody. They are only concerned with consumption,
Eating.
Even more contractile. So I don't think we have to worry about too much of them that sort, hyperdimensional ones walking amongst us, but there are certainly human people who believe and practice satanic arts and so forth, and they are working very hard to become one of these higher dimensional evil beings so that they can just, become totally lazy and contractile and absorb food from all of their feeding tubes. And some of them are pretty evil as far as I can tell. And I've encountered a few low-level ones. I wrote about them in the Wave.
Yeah, we know who they are.
But like I said, I don't think the really high-level ones get out and interact much. They send all their, all of their feeding tube people to get out there and hook people up, and then they feed from them, and then they feed from them. So it becomes like a relay of loosh.
Do you think in this, like, I know we're speculating here, this is when the seas would rein us in and say, come back. But when they have these really dark ceremonial practices, when they're summoning these, reptilian, demonic, whatever these entities are that we've all heard stories about, is that when one of them, like a master desolate one, as you would call it in the books, would come and make themselves appear? Is that because you've heard stories of so many people talking about?
Yeah,
that's when they show up.
It's really possible that they might appear briefly just to, give their, their followers or whatever some kind of a titillation or thrill and make them feel like they've been blessed with an appearance. But they certainly don't do much as far as I've been able to tell. They're, like I said, they're very contractile. As for positive ones, you have to remember the rules that they have to live by, which is to, non-interference unless truly asked. And, the thieves have said, I asked them, what does it mean to be 4D SDO or just SDO, without any, parameters on it? And this is one who gives all to those who ask. Now, that sounds like a really simple formula, but when you think about it, it's really not so simple. I mean, what person is able to really give all, and what kind of person is able to really ask? Most people manipulate, they demand, they feel entitled to, all kinds of emotions are behind any kind of request.
Right.
And it's like, I even asked the Siege, how come I got a connection with you guys? And they said, because she asked.
Right. Exactly. You came from a pure heart.
And it was, I did an awful lot of work before I got to the point where I knew I couldn't do it on my own because it simply wasn't available. There was stuff that simply wasn't available.
Did you have a husband that was literally siphoning every bit of energy from you? My ex-wife, my current wife had this same thing happen to her. And I'm sure that my ex was siphoning from me and I didn't know.
Well,
it's crazy how it works.
Yeah, it is. And it's just kind of like the way it is. And there's people that live all their lives with somebody who's siphoning energy off of them.
Think about that.
And they, so yeah, we know we have experiences with that. So,
well, let me ask you about that. Can a person ascend at the realm border crossing, if that's how we want to refer it, as a service to others, candidate, if they're in a relationship with an absolute soul-sucking vampiric being, even if they do everything else right, can that person still make it out?
If they do everything else right, that would probably imply that they are aware that they are with someone who is doing that, and for their own reasons, they have chosen not to end the relationship, and they probably will be right. Because you can take care of some kinds of situations like that, but there are other situations where if you aren't aware, if you don't know that the person you're with is siphoning your energy away from you, then there's nothing you can do. If you are aware, you can protect yourself. So anybody.
the question for you around that, and this goes to like Gary Zukav, and I don't know what Gary's side Gary Zukav's on, but his newest book, which was from 2022, Hunter, and I can't even remember the name of it. It's over at my bookcase. I'm not going to look for it because I want to keep the spirit of this conversation. But he says that you can't truly spiritually evolve if you are in a relationship with a normie, a sheeple, a person that's not aware, and you are aware, because ultimately the energy comes back to the mean. So what do you say about that? Because I agree with what you just said, but what do you think about that
I
statement?
agree, because if you're aware, if you know, and you are staying in the situation for your own reasons, I think you'll be fine.
So what would be, I guess, for the audience, what would be the other reasons, like to take care of children, to provide?
For children, for simple compassion, because let's face
That's a good one.
if you're with an individual who has to feed to survive, say an organic portal type,
Mm-hmm.
I think that our attitude towards such individuals should be that of compassion. I mean, just the same way we're compassionate towards dogs and cats, and other creatures. So, if you're in a situation where, for whatever reason, and everybody's reasons would have to be, different, or would necessarily be different, as long as you are aware and as long as you do not allow the feeding. But the problem there is, if you don't allow the feeding,
How do they eat?
then that other person is likely to extract themselves from your environment anyway.
That's a good point. So is that what happened with your ex?
No, I mean, I extracted myself from the environment. I knew I was going to die if I didn't.
Right. That's kind of the way Monica was too with her ex. It was like she just got to a point where she was like, I don't care.
I was
There's
well,
no
I was
option.
I was physically dying.
Yeah. Yeah, you were physically dying. Yeah.
So I mean, I knew I needed to be able to raise my children, and if I wanted to raise my children, all of my ideas about staying in the marriage for the sake of the children, just had to fly out the window, because I realized I wouldn't be there to take care of them, and they would be there subject to, his very strange ideas and ways of being and I
So
would hurt them.
so just having that mindset, though, this is a fascinating discussion. So just having that mindset, because we all have been brainwashed, in my opinion, that you stay in marriages for the sake of the children. I know that it's religion, it's Christianity, it's Catholicism, it's so many. Is that a hyperdimensional control construct that they created?
Not necessarily. Once again, there's no simple answer.
Yeah.
Not necessarily, because but the problem is that marriage has become something different from what it was in former times, and it comes about in different ways than it did in former times, and for different reasons. People fall in lust, and they have this whole programming that causes them to marry somebody for certain reasons,
Right.
and those reasons aren't enough to sustain a relationship much past 5 to 7 years usually.
Right.
And I mean, it's like, watched a talk given by a divorce lawyer, and he said, from the statistics on divorce, which is well over 50% of all marriages end in divorce,
Right.
and he wouldn't get married. He just just simply wouldn't. But marriages should be monogamous, and they should be long lasting.
Agree.
That is the condition in which the greatest spiritual growth
That's right.
can take place. So marrying for the right reasons to the right person is a very important thing, and it's not so easy to find out. Um, in some cultures, they have people who pair people because they know things about them objectively that the two individuals may not know themselves. So they put them together, and it turns out to be, a good fit. usually when people are allowed to choose on their own, it's usually, over 50% divorce rate.
Well, the other question around that though is, so what we see completely eye to eye on this. The other question about that is of the people that are staying together, how many of them are actually cheating on each other?
Well, yeah, and that's another bad thing because when you have sex with somebody, it changes your frequency. It can change what do you call it? The transmission and receivership capability of some of your DNA. Changes your energy field, and that's for both partners. And
Right.
that you can also pass attachments that way. So, yeah, I mean, that's that's just reality. So then, you have an affair, and then you come back to your partner, and you've got this messed up energy and this messed up DNA and everything, and then you have sex with your partner, and you pass somebody
Crazy.
onto your partner, male or female, whatever, and it's so there are very, very good reasons for monogamy that are spiritual or energy related. And there's also very, very good reasons for people to abstain from sex until they are in a monogamous relationship.
Yeah.
So,
Laura, I wanted to ask you this because I just thought of it. Do you think, because we've talked about the orgasm a little bit, which we could probably go into deeper detail, do you think a child that is conceived through orgasm of both parties at the moment of conception has any sort of like different DNA transcription or manifestation when they're born versus one that is not? And that there's something to the idea that when two people are in a monogamous relationship, they're in love with each other and they have an orgasm when the child is formed, that child will now either have a different DNA expression that allows them to be more spiritual, whatever that would mean, versus two people that are not, that are one's cheating on the other or whatever, and then they're born out of that, and then there's like this trauma that's passed down generationally to them.
I like it.
Yeah.
Like you said, yeah, all possibilities. I think about that of people.
It would make sense.
Well, in the Barbara Marciniak books, which the C's have said are somewhat accurate, they talk about managing one of the biggest jobs of a human is to manage their energy field. And having
the same thing, and Castaneda is the same thing, and
right.
alchemists say the same thing, so it's all managing your energy is very important.
Do you think it's the most important thing?
The most important thing
As a human in third density?
I guess it would depend on what your objective was. If your objective is to manage your energy in order to serve others,
right,
probably highly, highly important. If you're managing your energy because you're selfish and you have selfish goals and aims, then I think it's probably not so good a thing.
Good point. It's the opposite. If you're managing energy to harvest adrenochrome, probably not a good idea.
But managing your energy is extremely, extremely important, because you can't think, you can't see, you can't perceive at higher levels. You can't do a whole host of things if you don't have the energy of awareness, and that's what Beth Moore calls it. I'm trying to think if there was a specific term that Gurdjieff gave to her, and I don't think there especially was. He was taught. He was concerned more about the difference between essence and being.
Right.
So if you have essence but you don't have being, then it's wasted. And if you have too much being and not enough essence, then then you can't do anything. Being, for him, it was being able to do, to actually be able to do, because people think that they are able to do and they're not. They're completely helpless. They can't really do anything because they can't see accurately. They can't see objectively. They don't have the energy. uh, they don't have the knowledge. Knowledge is really, really a big one because, it's like Gurdjieff talks about external considering being, super, super important. And that's having a knowledge of yourself, a really accurate, ruthless knowledge of yourself and your failings and your strengths and all of the things that, are going on with you, and knowledge of other people so that,
Mhm.
you can make your life and their life easier. Gurdjieff, for example, he had a wife that he was married to for whatever reason, and he wasn't faithful to her. I don't think he was a very good example, but then he was a product of his culture too.
Right.
He had affairs with other women. And then of course, he didn't, he ended up having that accident that, injured his brain and, kind of faded away and his work got messed up because, and I think his ego was just a little bit too big. I love Gurdjieff, but I think his ego was too big and he bit off way more than he could chew. So yeah, energy conservation is important, and it's important for another reason. You don't want your energy feeding STS.
Exactly. Exactly.
I mean, as simple as that.
That's why I asked you that, because in my personal experience, in the last 5 years, so I can almost cry just thinking about this. Like, I have become so cognizant of how I act based on what happens to me, right? And I can always choose to respond out of love, which takes thought, it takes emotional control, it takes responsibility, great responsibility, or I can react, which is, again, I go back to the, vibrational analysis field over here, and it's like 80% of humanity just reacts. Ah, road rage. Somebody cut me off. Fuck them. I'm going to get them. Right? We've all been there. But once you get to some place where you can actually look back at the moment it happens and be like, okay, I don't have to jump into a rage. I don't have to react. I don't have to emote. I don't have to just be a nut job. You're not being fed off of.
You can also practice saying I'm sorry and meaning it sincerely a lot.
That's true too.
I mean, you should try to find a way to, to find out if you can say I'm sorry
And mean it.
at least once a day, if not more often, and be sincere about it. And then also have a talk with yourself about not putting yourself in the position where you have to say I'm sorry every day. So,
Well, I think a lot of times men, especially, this is a really good point that you just made, because I think men, especially early in relationships with women or whoever your significant other is, whoever's the feminine and the masculine, they want to apologize for everything to make things right in the relationship. And it's the absolute wrong thing to do, because if you do that every single time for your wife or for your husband or whatever, whoever's the masculine, whoever's the feminine, and I know there's a combination of it, but if you do that every single time, you disable the other person from taking responsibility.
well, it depends on who really needs to say they're sorry. I mean, each case is individual. Sometimes you really need to say it, and sometimes you need to say, I'm sorry you felt that way about what I said or what I did.
That's a great point.
I didn't mean it the way you took it, but I'm me too. I'm a human being too, and I didn't mean it that way, and any normal person would have taken it the way I meant it. Don't do
No, but
that.
I mean, but you're making a fascinatingly amazing point here, because Hunter, this from just, your relationships too. Like, we really want to, I'll just say it as this, as a masculine, energized man, we want, whether it's brainwashing and hyperdimensional control construct, either or, it doesn't matter. We want to fall on the sword and make things right. And it's not always the right thing to do by falling on the sword, regardless of who's at fault. It's what you just said. It's having the awareness to have a conversation or to communicate effectively where both adults can come to a place of like looking at what really happened and examining their thoughts and their feelings and going to it from there. Whereas I'm telling you, I see it so often, even in my own personal relationships in my life, where I've just been like, you know what, I'm a stronger person. I'm going to fix this. And I'm not now allowing my spouse or my significant other, or even if it's a child, or a brother or sibling or whatever, you're not allowing that to be conducive to effective communication.
Communication is the huge key to any relationship. I mean, talk. I mean, this is my husband. He talk. He's always telling me, because I tend to, go in a shell.
Yeah, you're Monica. You're Monica.
Yeah.
You're my wife.
I lock up and I well, if you don't know, I can get the time with.
It's crazy. I can't see you being that way, but I mean, I can, but obviously learning from you and stuff, it's weird. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing though. And I really do think, and this is just my opinion again, but I really think that women are also trained from an early age to do that.
Yeah, it's true. And so me to be able to air my sincere complaints, even if I know that they may be childish, they may be petty. Believe it or not, I can feel a little petty sometimes. But if I can tell him about it, and then we can talk about it, then it kind of relieves it, and then it stops affecting me in that way. But yeah, and we kind of made a rule at the beginning of our relationship that we would always be honest with each other. And I mean, you can be honest and be loving, I mean, like he could put his arm around me and say, I love you, but do you really want to do that? Do you really want to? And I mean, it came in important at a couple of times, because there were several times back in 99, 2000, 2001, when I just wanted to just shut down the website, not publish any more of the C's material, and just, throw in the towel and go home. And I mean, it even comes through in some of the sessions, because, I didn't understand in the beginning that I was going to come under so much attack. And I got really upset after one of these episodes, and I just jumped up from my desk and went into my bedroom and curled up in the bed, and I just laid there and thought, I'm, the kind of hours I put into this, the years I've put into this, and and I mean, all through my head, and then people accuse me of crap like that, and they say those nasty, mean things, and then they do blah, 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 that sort of thing. I'm going to just go in there and I'm going to delete the website and heck with all of them.
I'm going to delete it. I'm going to take my ball and go home and delete the website.
Yeah. And so he comes in and he says, what's going on? And so finally I got up enough nerve to say all of that. And so he puts his arms around me and he says, well, what about all of the people, who you have helped? And he starts talking to me, and explaining, So I didn't delete the website, but that's the kind of thing, he could tell me, he says, you feel this way because, you've done so much and so on, and you feel like, you're thwarted, you're hurt, whatever, but you can't have those kinds of feelings when you're doing this kind of thing. You can't allow that to come into play, because, you're doing something that's bigger than you as a human being are, and that was where the honesty comes in, that, yeah, you're being childish and petty without exactly saying it that way, but it comes across, you have to be bigger than this. And so yeah, communication and honesty, and you can keep on. And we had a conversation at that time. He says, what if, he says, from your publishing, you've got me, he says, and you're putting all of this material out, you're writing. I was writing The Wave at the time. And he says, what if there aren't any others? And I sat there, and I'll never forget it. I sat there and I thought about it. And then I said, well, I guess I should do it anyway, because the universe deserves it. somebody needs to talk about these things and point these things out just for the sake of it being the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do. The universe deserves it. It would be a shame for the universe to end if nobody in the universe was telling the truth.
I mean, honestly,
Well,
we wouldn't even
Laura,
have a podcast right now, Hunter, if she didn't do it.
yeah, well, I was going to say, thank God you did. And I wanted to ask you because this is something, Jay's dealt with for many years, but it's increasing now because of us talking about this very stuff right here.
Oh, imagine
How
what it's
have-
going to be like in 6 weeks, bro.
I know. Well, I wanted to ask you, Laura, is just kind of selfish advice for ourselves, but how have you through the years dealt with attacks from people and entities and organizations? Because like you said, it's obviously very tough. And that's one thing Jay and I have dealt with, but it seems to be now more on the forefront, I guess, just because what we talk about is kind of increasing in popular consciousness. But how have you dealt with that and kind of kept pushing forward? Because I've felt kind of the same way at some points. Like, is it really worth trying to tell people, our information is really worth trying to teach people or write to people or make videos for people? Because it just seems like to fall on deaf ears. And not only does it fall on deaf ears, but then you get attacked by people that are, criticizing what you're saying. So how have you dealt with that through the years to kind of make it through to the other side?
It hasn't been easy. I have experienced a lot of physical reactions to being attacked, illness. Sometimes I have even had what clearly, and everybody around me knows that it was clearly that there was some force that was unleashed against me that caused me an injury that then took a long time to recover from. And one particular one, I fell, and I didn't break my kneecap, but the meniscus, the cartilage under the knee, broke into 3 pieces. Shortly after that, because I kept walking around on the knee because a messed up knee is not going to stop me. And then I got into another situation where and I could actually physically feel a force pushed me, and I fell, and because the knee was already injured, I fell in such a way that I tore my hamstring on the back of the same leg. And then, of course, you get messed up with messed up diagnoses from doctors who aren't paying attention to what's going on. I suffered from that thing 6 months. 6 months. It was just unbelievable. And then there was the broken tailbone, and then there was, this, that, and the other thing, physical problems, issues, and so forth. So that's usually the way I, and it gets internalized. And so I've gotten better at being more aware because, you have to be really aware. You'll be very careful when you're doing something. And I've had a great support system. If there's anything that will get you through it is having a support system. You having people around you, a group around you that supports you, that can talk to you, that can take care of you, that can help you. I mean, I have had the most incredible support system or any human being on this planet. I swear it's without compare. I mean, in terms of love and care and the devotion of the kids to me and my kids' partners, and they just take wonderful care of me, so that
Isn't that divine reciprocity in action because of all the things that you've done? I mean, look at the people, the audience you've attracted. I mean, again, it's like attracts like. I mean, I'm not, saying that you weren't an amazing mom, because clearly you were and are based on just these broadcasts alone. But isn't that just divine reciprocity in action?
Well, I hope so. I hope, every once in a while I think, I must have done something good because, God has blessed me with, the most wonderful husband in the world and the most wonderful kids in the world and the kids' partners and, the friends and, people in our groups, who support and take care of me. So, I don't, that's what's gotten me through it is that. My network, my people, because I am the kind of person who internalizes these painful things, and I, I mean, there have been times when I've been so depressed that, I could hardly get out of bed for days on end. It hasn't been easy. It has not been easy. So if anything, you need to be with a support system. And for us, we all live in the same house together, mostly. We have several houses around the world that have groups living in them. But, in our particular group, we have a big house with a big group, and it's all part of the support system. And, it's like tribal living. And
Yeah.
I think people should live in tribes. There should be several couples. There should be old people. There should be young people. There should be some singles. There should be, a mix of people with different skills and abilities, and all live together and support each other. And it's not like a commune, not anything like that. It's like, it's just like a big family. A real family. You sit down at the table and you have dinner together. You talk about things. You all work together. We all are involved in the same work and the same goals and same objectives, and we support each other. We watch each other's back. We take care of each other when we're sick. I mean, one of our beloved members, passed away last October, and he was with us for 14 years. And for all of those 14 years, he battled cancer. And we made sure that he had the most optimal life anybody could possibly have under those conditions. And he was happy for those 14 years. So, that's the kind of, and you care for each other. Or, it's kind of like, it's bigger than a marriage.
Mm-hmm. I think that's the way we were designed before the hyperdimensional, if that's what we want to call it, control structure took over our modern day living, because we were, it begs the question of the Aboriginals and the Amazonian lost tribes and whoever is still living on this planet without the interruption of modern technology and society and whatever this is, industrialized living, are they closer and better off than us?
Maybe in some ways.
Well, aren't they probably all telepathic?
Maybe they are. I don't. I think that we've been given brain for reasons.
Yeah.
It's like Fred Hoyle said, he doesn't see any evolutionary advantage to being able to do mathematics. But some people are, people in the Amazonian rainforest, some of them I think can't count any higher than 3 because they can't engage with that concept.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think mathematics is useful, and I think philosophy is useful, and I think history is useful, and I think, interpersonal relations are useful, and sewing and genealogy. I mean, there's so many benefits to, culture. And why can't we have it in such a way that it's beautiful and not overruled by, the horrific pathology that runs our world today?
Well, so Hunter sent me this question this morning, and it's a perfect segue. And is there a world in which we live in harmony with technology in a service to others manner?
I think we could. And, I had a dream about it one night, and I'm pretty sure it was the seas talking to me directly, because it was like, I had the voice, because when the seas talk to me directly, I have a voice. And it usually happens when I'm sleeping. I'm not one of those people that does trances or any nonsense like that. But I woke up and it was stated very clearly, any technology that does not require at least 51% human input is entropic. So, technology is a good thing. I mean, I love my washing machine and my dryer. I love my dishwasher, but, I have to interact with them in order for them to work. And the same thing with like tractors and plows and other things, that takes human input. But when they start putting robots in the place of humans, you've gone over that percentage. It's no longer 51% human input.
So is that the ultimate goal? Is that the ultimate goal of fourth density, to just make us into man machine or into biobots?
Oh, they just want slaves.
Yeah.
They just want slaves
But
because
do they want useful slaves?
my guess is that the technology as we actually understand it is probably gonna be to a great extent destroyed. There's going to be 4D technology, of course, and that's a whole other ballgame. But that's going to be reserved for the 4D operators. And I think that the human beings they're grooming and preparing to survive into their 4D hellhole are going to be just simply slaves.
That's a question I have for you. How and Hunter, I know we ask this amongst ourselves when we talk sometimes on our own shows, but like, how does 4D service to others and 4D service to self coexist?
They don't coexist in the sense that you think, because remember, the big rule about 4D SDS is wishful thinking.
Right.
Now, you know that if you're, say, on X and you're reading a post from a woke libtard, and they're talking about this and this and this and this and the other thing, and you're reading what they're saying, and you're saying to yourself, what reality do they live in that they think that that's actually true?
Right.
And this, of course, goes back to the your truth, my truth, relativity type thing, right? And there are actually people, who they live in they live in a bubble. They live in a different reality than we live in, because I see what they're saying, and I can bring in, and if I had that person there, and if they had duct tape on their mouth so they couldn't interrupt me, I could sit there and bring them facts and data and proof and show them stuff. But you know what? I don't think it would make any difference. They would still, even with the facts, even with the data, even with the evidence, they would still refuse the truth. That's living in your own reality. And that's what 4D STS does, to an extent that we can't comprehend, because for them, it becomes the reality.
So is that reality, though, due to technology mind controlling them, or it just a chosen state of being?
When we're talking about 4D STS, that's because of their wishful thinking, that becomes their reality. They then, of course, try to suck everybody into their reality, just like any woke libtard does, because, the more people you suck into your reality, because at some level of your subconscious, surely there's some part of you knows that you're selecting and substituting premises and conclusions, and replacing truth with, these, slipshod, shoddy products of very poor reasoning. So they know at some level, but so that means that they have to draw more people into their bubble of belief system in order to justify and to feel comfortable, kind of like the right man syndrome. But for 4D SDS, that very process literally creates their reality. And of course, they too are trying to suck 3D STS into their reality, and they've been trying to do it for 309,000 years.
Insane. I mean, but do you think a 3D a 3D STS person is actually thinking like them or under their mind control?
Probably a little of both, because there's such a wide variation of types of human beings on the planet. I mean, you're familiar with the bell curve of intelligence, right? Okay, well, there's a bell curve for all other kinds of qualities, and there are people who are on this end, people who are on this end, and then the vast majority kind of in the center of the bell curve. So there are people who are born who are innately and in their essence probably STS. And just like there are people who are born with a bias toward STO. But we have to remember that we live in an STS reality.
Right.
Basically, to a large extent, we are all served,
STS.
because we can't help but be otherwise, because we're composed of these, the smorgasbord of genetic constructions that, kind of run the show, our neurochemicals, our brain structure, our, the various ways that we operate is genetically set up. And so we have a genetic brain, we have, a spiritual brain, so to speak. We have different centers according to the esoteric tradition. You have the intellectual center, the emotional center, and the moving center. And getting those synchronized, and then, and some people have higher centers that are not quite connected with them. And but they have the capacity, the ability, through various practices and activities and approaches, to draw those higher centers in and have them merge with their lower centers. Not everybody has those higher centers in
In the raw material, remember Ra said that some beings have that ability innately. Now, is that because they're higher density beings incarnated in third density physical bodies?
There are some, I would say there are certainly some. But my approach is to not rely on that as being, true for, say, myself or whatever, because if you rely on that kind of thing, if you say, oh, I'm a star seed and I'm sixth density and I came here to save the world, you're just signing I mean, that's ego.
Yeah, it's silly.
And what you really need to do and what you really need to be, and this is something I got from my husband, is you need to be a good workman. Be a good workman. You're here, think of yourself as a debugging unit, and you're going to help debug the universe. So, set about it in the best way you know how, and do it, and don't give yourself any airs that you're better. I mean, I still do my own laundry and I clean toilets.
So do I.
So
I'll never do that. I actually like cleaning toilets.
I'm not sure I like cleaning toilets.
I love cleaning toilets.
Well,
I like cleaning cars and I like cleaning toilets.
Yeah, well, yeah, we can
Probably depends on who used the toilet too.
All right, now this conversation has gone down the toilet.
Hunter, did you want to ask her as like a last question for today about Twitter or X?
Maybe we could talk about it tomorrow. I just had some thoughts pop into my head this week, Laura, about Twitter being like this giant reality creation machine that has like AI creating narratives that then people get hooked into, and that manifests as reality because that becomes part of their reality. Kind of like to what you were just saying about the SES of like people getting absorbed into like the reality creation. So that was kind of, I just had that random thought pop to me as like, is Twitter or any other platform really? I think Twitter's
No,
just
but
really
I like Twitter because of what Laura said earlier in a different broadcast. It seems to attract the most aware people.
Yeah, it's great. I love it right now. I mean,
well, yeah, because at the very least, you have to be able to read to be on Twitter.
That's true. That's true.
It's one thing. There's a safeguard. There's always a safeguard. The network, and that's one of the reasons why we have a forum and why we have so many people from all over the world, contributing information and insights from their own area of the world, so that when something comes up, we have a much better idea of what is really going on as opposed to what the news may tell us or what idiots on Twitter may, conspire to tell us. And I've never seen it work as well as it did when COVID began, because we had a thread that started, and I mean, we've got millions of views of this thread and tens of thousands of posts, because we went through the whole COVID thing with this thread, like going 90 to nothing. I mean, every day. And you couldn't even, sometimes it would grow by 6, 7, 8 pages in a day. You can hardly keep up with it because people
Well,
were reporting from
More importantly, too, those were not bots. So the reason I say that is because whether it's Twitter or other platforms, what your forum doesn't have and what I think makes it so great is there's no bots. So what Jay and I proved this week is that these people that are writing this stuff, I ran it through, and I don't know how accurate these are, but I ran it through an AI text detection tool, and all these posts are like 95% written by AI. And so it's like, what are people getting sucked into that's like not even human
Well,
written?
yeah, well, the thing is that it was announced on Twitter on Thursday. Apparently, this problem.
Yeah, they're getting rid of the bot accounts.
They are using this tool to detect bots and to close their accounts. So hopefully that'll be taken care of. I still have, hope for Twitter helping at least for a while before it gets, taken out like just about everything else does.
Well, I do too, because I think it goes back to the network effects, because Twitter is just the tool, but if you create networks on the tool that you can safeguard against like infiltration from those things, or at least where there's like some sort of like dialogue about it, to where it's like, okay, we have a network and that network decides like on like, this is wrong, this is false, this is true. And then you can have each other to check each other. I think it works well, but to like, we're talking about with the bots.
Well, to Laura, to your credit, and to the C's knowledge base, and to you building the technological infrastructure of the Cassiopaean Forum, but just in my limited exposure to you, which has been close to a year now, which is insane because it started actually in May of last year. Well, that's not true. It's longer than a year because you and I read The Secret History, right, Hunter, about 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. I think we told you, we read that book and we were like, you're so deep. What the fuck? Our heads explode. We had to like decompress a little bit before we could get into the Wave series. But to your credit, and again, for the audience listening to this, the Cassiopaean Forum is the most profound place on planet Earth. I mean, I don't say that like to blow smoke. I'm saying it because it's true. Like, we can debug
just about
right away.
Yeah.
In a day.
I mean, you throw it up on the forum and you've got,
one day,
people from all around the world with different skill sets.
Yes.
Yeah. Investigating and looking at and reporting back. And we got a terrific team of moderators who keep an eye on, keeping the riffraff out.
Trolls.
Trolls and bots. So, and we try to, there is a certain decorum we like to maintain. But we're not like, dictators or anything. And, about anything can be discussed if you discuss it. I'm not crazy about people who come on there and say, well, I'm a black magician. I want to convert you guys. I'm not going to allow it.
In truth, I limit my time on the forum daily because if I stayed if I didn't, I wouldn't get any work done in my life.
Well, that's how good it is to read. I'm the same way because I want to go on and read, and then I will end up reading for like 2 hours, and then I realize I don't write anything to contribute when I should be like at least half of the time should be like writing.
You have to read for a while because once you may find that whatever you're thinking about has already been said by somebody, because it's been going on for a lot of years, and there's tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of posts and readers, and oh my God, it's
unreal. It's unreal.
And then I would be what I call people in our group about, we have the private group for health stuff where we teach people about peptides and hormones and everything. And then we're always telling people, because people will come in and they'll ask a question that's been answered 70,000 times. And then the other members get mad at them because they're like, hey, we've been here for this long and we don't want to have to deal with like kindergarten questions when we've been doing that. We can easily go look it up.
Function.
Search. Yes. Same thing. Yeah. Well, my group's 3 years old. You guys are 20 years old, but like, it's cool because like you said, the network, we only have 400 plus people in there now, but like the network is all people like us.
Yeah.
So it's like, if you get in there and you're a normie, quote unquote sheeple, not where you should be to be in that group, you're exposed and outed immediately, and you leave, and we don't have to send you packing. You just leave on your own accord. You're like, oh, I'm in the wrong place.
Yeah, that's what we do. I mean, they there are some people that, slide by for a while, but they do it because, they're tricky. They're slimy, and
Yeah.
uh, they'll slide by for a while being super, super nice. And then finally some issue will come up that triggers them. And then you see who and what they really are. And then they're out the door, gonzaroni, sayonara. So,
Peaced out.
yeah.
All right. Well, we'll wrap. We'll wrap for today, and we'll pick up tomorrow. But another amazing show. Laura, we appreciate you being here today, and of course for all of these shows. Hunter, do you have anything else to say, or we'll just shut it down for tomorrow?
That's it for me. As always, thank you, Laura.
I'm going to try to
Always.
figure out what my explosion was. It happened at 5:45 my time.
Okay. Well, we'll talk to you tomorrow. I have somebody that's actually at my home right now too. So I love all of you guys. We'll see you guys tomorrow.